yourselves and we'll start taking questions.
Everybody, I'm Tim Friedlander, president and co-founder of the National Executive Director.
I'm Sissy Jones. I'm a voice actress and also co-founder and VP of strategic partnerships for an AI voice company called Morphine, we just announced yesterday.
Hi, I'm Duncan Crabtree-Ireland. I'm National Executive Director and Chief Negotiator of SAG-AFTRA. And for those who don't know, SAG-AFTRA is a union that represents really everybody who works in front of a camera or behind a microphone, but that certainly includes voice actors who work in video games as well as in streaming, film, television, et cetera, et cetera. About 160,000 members.
I'm Sarah Almali. I'm a voice actor and voice director and chair of the Interactive Negotiating Committee at SAG-AFTRA.
I'm Andy Norris. I am a voice actor and performance capture artist.
I'm Courtney Taylor. I'm a voice actor, and I kicked off the vocal variants chapter that led to sort of, I don't know, the beginning of this. Maybe not the beginning,
sort of the
but
AI research.
sort of a consulting panel of voice actors for the issue of AI performance.
Awesome. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
You start using microphones.
Start over again, you guys.
Save our voices, for one day. Do you have a question?
Yes, general question. So obviously voice acting is prevalent in commercial, prevalent in animation, gaming. I'm wondering if you guys can distinguish for us sort of the differences between those and the impact that AI might have on them in those industries in a different way, or even the ways that they overlap.
Within like the different genres of voiceover?
And the different
Sure.
mediums,
Yeah,
that you guys are
the voiceover industry, a massive part of it is the non-broadcast, industrial, e-learning, audiobooks, some of the stuff that we don't see a lot of. The more public face of that is something people you see here today, which is like animation, video game, commercial work. So it crosses anything that you hear a voice on. So phone system, HR training videos, all of the COVID videos that things were happening along the lines. A lot of that stuff is all voice actors. And specifically with AI, some of the dangers we're looking at is some of those entry-level non-broadcast work is very easy to replace by AI or synthetic voices due to the fact that it's largely unknown who the voice actors are, and it's largely unseen by a large amount of the public. So for those jobs to be replaced by AI, it's very simple because a lot of people don't notice or hear it. And then you get into some of the larger stuff, video games, animation, commercial work, promos, dubbing. Dubbing is massive. Globally, dubbing is huge. Everything has to be dubbed into different languages. So all the English language stuff that we do in English has to be dubbed into every single other language around the world.
Even though there's so many facets to voice acting, though, I do want to emphasize that really the key principles that we're fighting for are consistent across all of those different facets, right? So fundamentally, the idea of informed consent about the use of your voice, as well as your image, your likeness, your performance, the idea that there should be fair compensation for any kind of reuse of that work that you've done. The idea that if your performance, your voice, anything about you is going to be used to train AI systems, that's only done with proper consent and with appropriate guardrails. Those kinds of issues, those kinds of principles are really common across all of the areas of AI implementation with all different types of voice acting. So even though there's so many different facets, really the concepts as they relate to AI in terms of protecting performers, they're very much consistent and aligned, and I think fundamentally.
And also, too, in the world of video games and performance capture, it's much easier to get your voice sort of lost in the shuffle. When you do something like a commercial for a product, it's generally you and maybe one other person. But on a video game, they can have hundreds of people working on that. And so to start replicating our voices or being able to take our performances and make them have other sounds where we're not getting compensated, or in performance capture, people have had their movements taken and replicated. So while some areas are it's a very small cast, other areas it's much harder to trace, so with much bigger casts.
So it sounds like everybody's basically starting off with low-level AI protections across the industry. It's not like gaming sort of has something already implemented.
No, right now the regulations are so woefully behind the technology, so there is nothing in place to protect any of us. Voice actors, journalists, none of us are protected. So that's something that we've been working with at NAVA to speak with government officials, speak with various organizations there to help them understand what we need to see as a human race for protections. Voiceover is easy to steal, right? Our voices are out there. Oftentimes people don't know what we look like. That's fine. I'm not George Clooney. I don't know if you knew that. There are websites that already have my voice uploaded to them without my consent. It's very easy to take a person's voice. We need protection. We need legislation. We have a union who is willing to fight for us, and we're trying to do it honestly as a stepping stone for all of us.
Yeah, to that point, it requires a whole range of measures. So collective bargaining is an absolutely essential protection for professional performers, right? Because the companies who employ them want to make extensive use of that work. But, there's also the issue of unauthorized use that's happening just out in the world in general. And so it's a combination of collective bargaining, public policy, and also education of professionals and members, and also education of the public. So that's really why we're all here together fighting this fight.
From a policy perspective, how do you think federal regulations can come in and enable you to have this fairness and control over your voice?
Well,
there is an existing concept in state law that allows for people to control the use of their image, their likeness for any kind of commercial purpose. We're looking to, first of all, federalize that protection, so it's not based on a state-by-state situation. So all Americans can depend upon that right. And by the way, performers and also people who aren't performers whose voice might be taken for whatever reason, or image or likeness. And so that entails really creating a protection at the federal level for likeness and voice that says companies of any kind cannot just take that and use it without consent, without fair compensation. We have legislative sponsors who are pursuing this at the federal level this year. We've already got that type of protection in about half of the states, and we're looking for that to expand as well. And it is really crucial as AI develops that we firmly establish this kind of protection of people's control of their image and likeness. And I think the public already is and will continue to be so supportive of this, because I think we all know what it feels like to potentially have someone take something about us and use it without permission. Whether it's whether it is our voice, or whether it's our face, or whether it's our name, or whatever. Nobody wants that to be done by some big company or anybody else without permission. And that's just a basic principle I think we can all stand behind.
I'm going to ask a follow-up to that. So, how do you foresee these regulations applying to something like ChatGPT and OpenAI, who have web crawlers that actively make organizations? I'm a content marketer, so I'm very deeply invested in what you guys are doing. That you just scan all the blogs and all of the stuff that's open on the internet and take it, unless someone takes an affirmative action as a company to protect their material.
So what I really see is that sort of two sides of this coin. The ingestion of material, that's primarily going to be a copyright issue. It's being litigated in the courts right now. We, I think all, have taken a very strong stand in support of the fact that if you're going to ingest material, you need proper permission, you need a license, you need to deal with the copyright owner, and you shouldn't be, that it is a violation of copyright to be taking that material and using it to train AI systems. When we talk about protection of likeness, that's really, I think, going to be on the use side. So what comes out of that training system? And what's coming out of that training system is something that incorporates any of the voices of these folks, or any of our members, or anybody, their faces, their performances, their persona, then that is going to trigger a violation of this federal right, which will allow compensation for that. And the concept is build these rights that protect on the inbound side and the outbound side. That's how we ensure there's some comprehensive protection to really balance this world out, because right now the balance is tipped too far in favor of this technology. No one's looking to stop it, but it has to be done with consent and with fair treatment of the people whose contributions are being used to make it. And we really think that can work as a combination of those different pieces of a public policy approach.
And the copyright stuff that's been happening is happening in all different countries. It's a very consistent approach around the world. for that. And then I think the next component is consumer protection as well in there, which I think the FTC talked about last week, is the right of the consumer to know if what they're hearing and taking in is synthetic or human. That same thing we talked about, like with food, you should have a right to know what's happening. That was part of the discussion. Duncan and I got a chance to speak to the FTC last week, and many of the people who were on that board, there were 12 panelists, I think, who got to speak on different parts of this, all had a very unified concept of copyright, like consumer protection, as well as the output. It's not a voice thing, it's not an on-camera thing, it is content creators, a creator is an artist thing that we're all dealing with. And I think all of this that we're doing is going to apply to so many people like yourself and other people out there in the industry.
One last one, I promise. But a lot of this really mirrors privacy law. Right to consent, right to retraction, right to get copies of your information. And we're seeing that stalled at the federal level in general. So what are the challenges that you guys feel you're facing when we're talking about something that's even more removed from the average person?
Well, if I may, just to say, I think we're really viewing this more as an intellectual property issue, right? Like there should be an intellectual property right in the use of your voice, your face, your likeness, your performance. And frankly, the kinds of kind of pushback that you get on privacy protections is a little bit different, and it comes from different sources than when you talk about intellectual property protections. Because I think, for better or worse in our culture, there is a recognition that the law needs to protect private property ownership, including intellectual property. So you're absolutely right that there's a privacy element, and there's a lot of things that are similar to those privacy approaches. But I think the approach we're really focused on is more of an intellectual property approach, saying, look, this is about commercialization and commercialized use without authorization of something that belongs to people. Their persona belongs to them, and that is a violation of their property.
And that's giving you a little bit more sort of a bipartisan traction.
Yes,
Yeah.
indeed.
Yeah.
You hit the nail right on the head.
That was where I was going, but I didn't want
I saw a question over here.
I guess I want to know, like, why AI at all? Like, how do you feel personally? Is there any advantage that you see? Or is it more so, like, soul-sucking and, like, taking away your career? Like, I know in terms of art, I know a lot of comic
I'll talk a little bit
artists.
about that. So, as I mentioned, I'm on the founding team of a startup company that is doing voice and AI together in an ethical way. So our entire approach is based on what Courtney and I started with the vocal variance group that's now a steering committee at NAVA. We want consent, so we're going directly to the actors to engage with them to create a digital voice. We want control. They get to say which projects they want to be a part of or not, and we want compensation. Right? Fair compensation in addition to clearly denoted exclusivity, clearly denoted terms, and safe storage. So with that said, there are so many opportunities for actors right now that don't have any voice because people don't know how to cast. They get, nervous when they talk about reaching out to the union, or they don't know how to reach out to their favorite actors. And so currently things are either subtitled, like internal videos, or they have, John from HR come and do a voice. So this is actually opening up an opportunity for actors to make additional income. And also, my background, I worked in the Silicon Valley for 10 years before I became an actor. I worked with several startup companies. I worked at Sequoia Capital venture firm. Technology does not move backwards. Technology is here. If we don't find a way to be a part of it, we will get shut out. So that was one of the major purposes for starting the vocal variance group and for working with this company is to give voice actors a seat at the table. Because if we don't have a seat at the table, it's an extinction level event.
And there's a lot of really wonderful things that you can do with it as far as for people who are, projects for the blind, things like that. There are opportunities to make this a wonderful thing. It's not all bad, but it just needs to have the consent, control, and compensation element to it, and oversight at the federal level in order to have it not go off the rails. As we've seen the people who have created some of this saying that this is a dangerous thing without oversight, so we need to pay attention.
You touched on this a little bit already, but fast forward 10 years, if AI wins, so to speak, if there are no regulations, what does this world look like? I mean, what does it look like for consumers and for your day-to-day as voice actors? Can you just walk me through? what we would be missing if AI is all we have.
Well, universal basic income better become the norm, because there's going to be a lot of people out of work.
See, I was going to say Skynet is what happens if AI wins.
Well,
I was going to say the expanse.
It's the end of truth for humanity. I mean, honestly, not to get into a completely like esoteric offshoot, but it is. In 10 years, if we don't know what's real, then politics, art, you guys as journalists are probably already facing this, where people are not hiring as many journalists now. They can have AI just go through and write a quick 10-point thing and pump it out, so you're getting less jobs. This is not just an actor issue. We are the canary in the coal mine for humanity. And it sounds dramatic, but it's not. Because if you can't tell what's real, how do you choose how to vote? How do you choose where to go? Nothing is what it seems. And so, while I'm really happy that people are supporting the actors in general, I think it's really also, you need to take a look at your life. Because 20 years ago, we had people who took tolls at bridges, and if you ever said, hey, you'll be able to zoom through and you won't even have to stop, it's unimaginable, right? So I think if everybody can view this as something that's important to you all as well, it will affect everyone's livelihood and everyone's everyday life.
Can I just add though, I think that, Duncan, you said this at San Diego, that like what happens next is not just, technology doesn't just manifest a future all on its own. It comes down to individual decisions and collective decisions. So if consumers are advocating for themselves and they say, I want authenticity and transparency in these, and I care about connecting to human beings through art, or I care about interfacing in this way with some degree of humanity in it, then we will find that out. The market will show it. People, the companies will have to adapt. I mean, everyone in this process has an opportunity to decide what we want the future to be. To me, the real existential threat in question is what generation of performers is lost in that effing around and finding out period. If we're like seeing how far we can push it to automate things, and we realize, of course, we want a human touch, of course, we want human input and connection. What happens to folks who are just coming into this space, coming into the video game space now? It's such a terrifying time to face down. How are you going to develop? How are you going to get that experience? How are you going to build your network? How are you going to grow? How are you going to become the kind of mature artist whose replica people want to use? So I mean, it's that loss of an entire generation of performers and workers in general that I fear the most, but I think we will come around and find out that a purely automated future isn't what anyone actually wants.
Yeah, I was gonna just quick follow up to use your wording. Are we in the F around stage, or are we already in the finding out stage?
Oh, good question.
Yes.
I think the answer is yes.
I think we're here. I mean, we're here today because we don't have 10 years. I think we have. You look at the exponential rate at which the technology has grown. You're talking about voiceover specifically. 2 years ago, it took about 10 hours of source audio to make a synthetic voice. Beginning of this year, it was 2 hours. Now, with certain technology, it takes 3 seconds of source audio. What I just said just now is enough. What any of us have said on this panel right now is enough to create a synthetic version of our voice that is believable
Your
and is high
outgoing
quality.
voicemail message is enough.
And the technology is changing too fast. We don't have 10 years.
But I think to your question, the real truth is our members, everyone reflected here and a whole bunch, thousands of others, are already focused on this issue. And so that's the good news. I mean, it's hard to believe it's good news that when I'm on the picket line outside of Disney, 14-year-olds are concerned about their career being gone because of AI. But it actually is good news because they are focused on it, we are focused on it, and we're doing something about it right now, which is the negotiations that we're engaged in both with respect to video games and also with film, television, and streaming. And so this issue isn't going away. Everyone is laser focused on it and going to make sure that as we move forward that there are protections in place, and whether it's contractual protections in those negotiations or whether it's public policy protections like Tim was talking about, whether it's the FTC in regards to authenticity or whether it's Congress in regards to intellectual property protections, we are going to do something about this. And so I think that's the light at the end of the tunnel, is the fact that people are not ignoring this issue. In fact, people who are really committed to making sure that we have a future of authentic, creative content are very concerned about this issue and taking action. And, like you referenced, Sarah, back in San Diego, one of the big messages was you can stand up to these big companies. Like this stuff doesn't happen on its own. We are not powerless. In fact, we are very powerful, and we can, all of us, these folks, and also all of us in this culture and society, we can stand up to these big companies and say, this is not how this is going to happen. We see a different vision and future for how this technology is going to roll out, and that's what we demand and insist upon. And I think we can achieve that.
So you mentioned journalism. I pay attention because I'm a journalist. I think that we feel like it's sort of at a stage where it's still too silly, but it does make us think about how quickly we can get to the point where it's not silly, which makes us think about the timeline of all of this. So I'm curious, how long do you guys think you have to negotiate for better protections before the point is we can't go back? And are you considering retroactive protections? I mean, there was a Bloomberg article that came out that logged every book that had been put into a machine without any author's consent. I don't know if there are any other industries that have that kind of database available to people so that they can see that their work has already been used, but it does seem like we're at a point where we'll have to go back and protect people. So I'm curious about how much time you can imagine it you really have to stop this, and then what you want to do.
Well, I mean, last year, I think it was, SAG-AFTRA declared use of transformative generative AI on performers' material to be a mandatory subject of bargaining. And so if you haven't bargained with the union for that use, it is not allowed. It's not permitted. And I don't think that has an expiration date or a historical timeline. So already, if you've been working on union contracts, they can't do it without bargaining, which is exactly what's happening, is we're bargaining them right now. And to your point of time, it's been a minute in negotiations on the games contract, and that's why we asked for a strike authorization vote, which was pretty loud and clear, 98.32% in favor, so that we can accelerate this bargaining. Because in the last, in the time that we've already been negotiating the contract, we've seen the time that it takes to create a replica shorten and the technology develops. So now is the time to bargain this stuff, and it's happening in 2 contracts now at the same time with this union. But as far as chasing for projects that aren't covered by a union contract, you will have to go back and chase that client and give that, NAVA has an additional piece of contract language that you can send to that person to say, hey, if you're going, are you going to use this? And if you are, here's the deal. So those are the 2 ways that you can do it. It's covered if it's a union contract, and they can't do it without talking to us. If it's a non-union contract, you have to advocate on your own behalf and go to your clients and make sure that you get that coverage.
I would also add, as you mentioned, this is very much a bipartisan issue in a government right now that is very divided. So I think the fact that the 2 sides are willing to have the conversation together, understanding that there needs to be guardrails quickly, is that it shows, the time is of the essence, right? They are just as at risk as we are with regards to deep fakes and things like that. So they are very motivated to get something done. Who knows how quickly governmental motivation.
We're all very motivated to get things done. It doesn't mean it moves on our timeline.
I think we're seeing more in Europe, right? The European Union is working on the EU AI Act right now, and they're looking at the exact same things. One of the calls, we're now as part of the United Voice Artists Federation, which is 18 nations, 36 coalition association of voiceover associations. We're working on an amendment to the proposal right now, and one of those amendments is to make all foundational models transparent, and if not making them transparent, we do to them to ask them to be destroyed. That's part of what the European Union is asking, and they're trying to do very similar to what the FTC is doing, is to use existing laws to not make new laws, but to use GDPR or to use FTC controls to just enforce the laws that are out there already and apply those to AI. But I think going back retroactively, NAVA, our goal is to get as much stuff under union contracts for protections as possible. We're trying to make work, we're trying to show the advantage of working under a union contract because the protections are there. 80% of the voiceover industry does not work under a union contract, which makes those contracts and those people very at high risk of being taken advantage of. We're currently working with the voice actor now. We signed a contract in 2017 that they're using that contract to turn her voice into a synthetic version of the voice and use it commercially without any compensation. Had that been under a union contract, there would have been protections. The more work we can get under those union contracts for protections are great, but there's damage now for people who have not been under those contracts. It's real and it's happening. We're seeing it happen right now. So I don't know if any of that legislation will retroactively apply to those contracts. My guess is what I've seen currently, probably not. So those voice actors are at a risk of losing those jobs and being really damaged going forward.
Although I do know, we have a bill in California, I know we're in New York, but we do have a bill in California right now that would retroactively invalidate consent that was obtained without a collective bargaining agreement or a lawyer's participation on the side of the talent. And so, there are various tools and approaches in the public policy sphere that we're looking for to try and help people who may have gotten, frankly, bamboozled into signing agreements that were unfair to them at the time. But I know one of the messages we all want to send out to everybody is if you are working outside of the scope of the union contract and union contract protection, be so vigilant about anything you sign, because it is it's so easy to sign something away that is almost impossible to get back. And yes, we're working hard to help those people, but the first line of defense is looking at what you're signing and refusing to sign something that gives someone rights to your voice, your image, your likeness, your persona, your perpetuity throughout the universe, by any technology now known or ever invented. Those are words you will find in so many releases and contracts people are asked to sign. And it may have been okay to sign something like that back in the day. It is not okay to sign it now, because if you sign that, it will be used. It will be used against you, and it's very hard to get out of it.
Have you considered combining with other genres, illustrators, actors, all in one union, as opposed to being like a panel where everybody?
Tim, I think you can talk to them. It's not union.
Yeah, United Voice Artists is, at least globally, but VIA is a Federation International des Artistes. I think is that mainly actors? Is that mainly actors?
It's mainly actors unions. Yeah. So like Tim was talking about, there is a global federation. But to your point about different sort of fields of work, all actors and all performers are united, either through SAG-AFTRA, also our sibling unions like Actors Equity for live performance, and this issue does affect live performance also, believe it or not. But when you start to talk about people who are like illustrators or graphic artists or people in those fields, there are some different challenges for unionization because of antiquated labor laws. But we absolutely can work together and partner together as we have been. And so there's the federations you were talking about, of voice artists associations, actors federations. There's a lot of global activity.
Human Artistry Campaign, which is record labels. It's a broad, there's a bunch of groups that are saying this, because this is not just a single art, this is just art in general that is at risk for this. So I think it's actually been great to see the kind of unification of and there's all variations on consent control, compensation, credit, clarity, lots of C's that float around in this discussion. But it's everybody comes around to the same thing, and they just want to know if their work's being used, whether they're whether they're making costumes or their motion capture, any of this stuff. Like if your way you walk has been
and this
scanned,
has been happening for so long, and a lot of the movement performance stuff is done historically has been done under non-union contracts, and we are forced to essentially sign all of our rights away, just like you've heard, with this in perpetuity throughout the universe, for anything that's ever, like any technology that's going to come up, which means that so much of our movement, and that's movement that people have trained decades to perfect, their martial arts skills. I'm primarily a creature performer. That's a very specialized movement, and that is already being used to create digital models. Like it's been happening.
And it's not like they give you a choice where you get this contract and you can't sort of negotiate your way out of it. It's either this is what they present you with, and if you say, I'm not going to sign that, then they go, great, we'll move on to the next person. Now, NAVA has created a rider that allows us to, but as actors, we also need to educate the people who represent us. So we have to talk to our agents about it, who can sometimes be a little bit gun shy about things like that. But we take this rider and present it to our agents to present to those people. And then this has been really the most negotiation between, because generally what it is and has been is, this is what we give everyone. If you don't like it, we'll move on to the next actor. So you feel like your hands are tied. So big ups to NAVA for bringing something forward.
People are saying
and
no. We're hearing people say no. I am not going to sign this contract. People are walking away. It's a scary thing.
Because now we have an option too.
Yeah, we have an option. Well, we know that people know the dangers, which I don't think even a year ago many people didn't really feel like understand the dangers, and they're willing to walk away. And one of the things that we say, especially for new voice actors, is don't make your next job your last job, if you sign away your contract on that very first job you do that says you have my voice forever, then you're never going to work again. And people are willing to walk away. We're